Time for Wine Talks with Paul K.
Fascinating story.
This is Robert Mondavi from the Michael Mondavi Winery.
I taste a lot of wine.
Having a conversation with Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary.
Michael Silacci, Opus One Winery.
Incredible conversation with Dr. Mia Ruth.
No matter what, you're definitely going to feel better.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today, about to have an amazing conversation with the authors of the game Bottle Shock. Introductions in just a moment. Hey, have a listen to Charles Smith, the famed Charles Smith. This is one intelligent, bright, risk-taking winemaker in the state of Washington, now the preeminent maker of wine in Washington. Just released incredible story. But since we're talking about Bottle Shock today, have a listen to Bo Barrett, the current president of Chateau Montelena, was working in the cellar when Mike Gergich made the famed wine that won the Judgement of Paris in 1976. And as well, the famed architect of such tasting, Steve Spurrier, was on the show many years ago, just before he passed. An amazing conversation about the history and the sort of the culture of wine and the lifestyle of wine. And don't let that outshadow the conversation I had with George Tabor, who was the only journalist to show up. And he'll tell you on the podcast, I just might have gone down the Champs-Elysees and just took a detour into a brasserie and never made it to the show, and I'm glad I did. It made his career. But welcome to the show. This is Flint Dilley, Randall Miller, and Jody Savin, authors of the game Bottle Shock. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us here.
I mean, it's already been a spirited conversation about what's going on.
Yeah, I think
here.
we've said all the good stuff in the green
Yeah,
room.
well,
so.
that's what I try to avoid, right?
Yeah,
Making sure.
probably really boring.
And you can see there's a book right here, The Judgment of Paris.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's George Tabor's book right there.
Yeah, it's we have a lot of history with that, and it's not about me today. It's about you. So we're going to talk about the game. Let's just start with this. I am beginning deluged with ads. Okay, and I didn't turn them off, though, so it was good, right?
Good.
Thank you.
I like that.
On this show, movie Bottle Shock. And I have a lot of history with the family, with the Barrett family. In fact, Bo would tell you that they celebrated this when Jim got home with a bottle of Merceau, which is odd because it's French Chardonnay, which he believes was purchased at my dad's shop at the time that they did it.
Wow.
So, there's a lot of history there. So tell me, are you guys wine people by sort of your enthusiasm or your inspiration for the thing, or you just thought an idea for a show? What prompted this idea to make a game?
Well, first of all, we Jody and I made the movie Bottle Shock, and we like wine. We're not like, we wouldn't say we're like the biggest wine drinkers, but we love great stories more than anything. And the story of the Judgment of Paris is a pretty phenomenal story. So that was sort of the origin for us for how we got involved, right?
Yeah. I mean, because movies are about characters. And the minute we met Bo and Jim, we thought, there's a movie here. There's a father-son story. There's, wine is an art form. And these guys were scrappy artists who turned...
How did you stumble across the idea that this thing existed, that the story? Did you read the book?
No, well, first thing was we had a movie prior to doing Bottle Shock. We had a movie called Marilyn Hotchkiss, which was Marissa Tomei, Robert Carlyle, a bunch of great actors, John Goodman, and it played at the Sonoma Film Festival. And at Sonoma Film Festival, it's a lot of people are into wine, obviously. We met the people who ran the festival, Brenda Lorimer and Mark Lorimer at the time, and they had this story, this script that they said, hey, will you guys look at this? And it was about it was a rough draft of sort of the tale of what Bottle Shock would eventually become. And so then what happened is that we said, okay, well, this is kind of an interesting story. Let us look into it more in detail to see, the authenticity of it and try and figure out, is there a real movie to be made here, right? And that's when we went to meet Bo and Jim up in Calistoga. And the thing that struck me, I don't know about you, but was that they were, on the one hand, they loved each other, but they bickered all the time. Mm-hmm. They were like, no, it didn't happen this way. No, it happened this way. And it wasn't like that. And it wasn't like this. No, the wine was good. No, the wine wasn't any good. It turned brown. It didn't turn brown. It was all this stuff, And we thought, there's a real story here with these two guys. If we can really capture that. And that sort of was the origin, right?
Yeah. And also we make a lot of movies about inadvertent artists. like people who have a dream, and then what the dream actually becomes was not necessarily the seed that they thought they were planting. Right. And this was definitely true. You know, in Chateau Montelena, they had a dream of making fine wine in Napa, and that seemed like such an outrageous
And Jim
dream.
wanted to make Cab. He didn't really want to make Chardonnay.
Well,
and
they've always been a red house in general. That's what they're supposed to be. But
and it was Gergens who had this white wine.
He really didn't want to be in the grape business. Sorry to interrupt you. They bought Montelena because it was a tax deal. They were looking at cotton and fruit and all kinds of stuff. And this winery up there called Chateau Montelena. It had been shuttered for years. He was an attorney that was, as you know, that was very. I don't think he left the practice for like 12 years after they won.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of took a little license with that. A little bit.
Supported him.
Yeah. Right. Well, look, everybody knows in this business, you know, that's the old adage: if you want to make $1 million, you know, in the wine business, start with 2 million. It's just
exactly.
It's impossible to do, except when that happens. But you were intrigued by the story by meeting these guys. But were you looking for stories at that time? Were you looking for something to do? Have you thought about the wine industry?
We're already always looking for stories.
Something,
we're always like, you know, people will tell us something and we'll think, God, is there a movie there? Can we tell that story? What is that story? Is it an interesting world to be involved in? And when you look into what happened with the Judgment of Paris, it really was like it created a sea change in the whole, you know, business in a way. And so that made it really great. It was an underdog story about these California guys who, up till then, a lot of people would just think, you know, box wine came from California and, you know, good wine came from France. That was basically what most people thought. My parents thought.
And you think, you know, it's interesting because wine, if you ask 100,000 people in America, do you drink wine? It's rumored by the Wine Institute, that 25,000 would raise their hand. But that includes, you know, somebody that goes to the Olive Garden and gets the House Chianti, you know, they drink wine, but they're not going to watch a movie or listen to a podcast on that. So,
well, the funny thing about Bottle Shock was when we made the movie, when we were talking to people about making the movie, all the vintners and people in California would say to us, there was two major things that really changed the business of wine for them. One was this thing about this plight of the vines.
Phylloxera,
phylloxera
and
blight.
the second thing was Sideways.
Sideways
Had a gigantic, you know, impact on the business. Like nobody could do Merlot anymore. Everybody could do Pinot. That was basically what happened with Sideways.
I mean, vineyards were ripping out their
Merlot based on Sideways.
Don't I know it, because I was trying to sell that stuff. In fact, I would adjust that list of three things. Phylloxera, of course, very important. In fact, in France, we were in Bordeaux just last week. One of the gentlemen said, yes, and we have American rootstock here because, you know, it went back and forth. He goes, that was the end of fine wine when we took back the American rootstock. I said, but it was your rootstock in the first place. So,
yeah.
What are you talking about? But actually, Sideways, The Judgment of Paris.
Judgment of Paris.
And Morley Safer's 1990 60 Minutes, when the Mediterranean lifestyle suggested you should drink red wine at night.
Oh, okay.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And my wine sales changed from red to white almost immediately.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
It's never gone
people
back.
were like, well, yeah, we want to be involved in a movie because Sideways was so impactful for them.
Yeah, right.
But please tell me you're not doing like against Pinot or something. You know?
Right.
Like you're now going to shift our
We're
business
doing a
again for us.
Chardonnay movie, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, that just goes to show you how much impact movies and culture have on people's attitudes, and we'll talk about the game now, as well as probably a game about the subject. I mean, Merlot, I can tell you, because I bought and sold a ton of wine, Pinot Noir is hard to find immediately after that. If you found it wasn't any good at the prices that you were used to paying. And Merlot you could buy it for nothing. I mean, literally I would say it took 12 to 15 years to recover.
Right.
Wow.
When you consider Chateau Petrus, probably the most expensive wine out of the bottle, is 100% Merlot generally. Chateau Cheval Blanc, Chateau Angelier, they're all Merlot.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with Merlot, everybody.
No,
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's just a couple of scenes in Sideways that just did it in.
It's just one 30-second scene.
Right. He spits it all out or something. I can't remember.
No, he's in the parking lot, and he goes, "I'm not drinking Merlot. No fucking Merlot." And the guy goes, "Okay, no."
And then we made the Chardonnay movie.
Yeah, and then you make a Chardonnay movie, which is kind of interesting.
And it did really do a lot. So what's funny about a movie, like it's a wine movie, right? But it's been seen millions and millions and millions of times by people who aren't even into wine.
Yeah, that's true.
It was huge on the airlines. Like they had whole like wine tasting things on airlines, which was like
and
kooky.
ships at sea.
So what did you see when you were doing this about the lifestyle of wine? Here you saw the brother, the son and the father bickering a little bit, and it kind of seems a little counterculture. But what did you find culturally with the wine business that you thought was different than what you expected when you started talking to them?
Well, the people are farmers first and foremost, the ones who are actually making the wine. So they really care about the dirt, the terroir, and Jody can say it better than me because he speaks French. But it was like they really cared about the essence of what goes into the what you do with your hands to make wine. That's what I thought was really interesting, because you don't really think about that when you go to an expensive wine shop in New York or someplace. You don't think of where it actually came from. And it came from these people who really care about the details. So that seems really interesting to me, And then it's really an art. It's like you taste a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you vary it a little bit more, and it suddenly becomes something great. There's something really interesting about that.
And it's hard to harness all the elements because nature's involved. So it's an art form that there's a lot of variables involved. So you're a farmer, you're a chemist. And in the end, you're making something that speaks to people as a form of art. It's pretty interesting when you think about it.
And they all come in a similar bottle. So the differences are really what's inside. It's not this other thing.
That is the undefinable part of wine, because bourbon, you don't do that with bourbon. You don't do it with beer. The beer, did I say something? The brewmaster's job is to make it taste like it did last year, and it's the distillery master's job to make sure Jack Daniel's tastes the same every time. And here, wine is not supposed to be that unless you buy something off the supermarket shelf. It's supposed to represent a different time and place. Maybe that's what connects to the human soul. I don't know. Can't be defined really, but it's an interesting part of wine.
Yeah.
So culturally, when you go into a place like most wine people I speak with, particularly all farmers, they're like, God, how do we sell this stuff? Like that's a whole different job.
Right.
And I don't really want to be part of that. I just want to make it and express myself best I can as an artist. And now I got to go sell it.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that Bo said to us, a number of times when we've talked to Bo. He'll say, it's really not that expensive to make a bottle of wine. It's really hard to sell a bottle of wine.
Yeah. So you stumbled across that part of the industry studying for this film.
Yeah. And people really, appreciate the fact that, what a movie can do. Like after the movie, when it was successful, there were tour buses that were like following the route of where we made our movie.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
The Bottle Shock tour.
There was a boxing ring that we did one scene. We built it on the Kundi estate, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, but people would have weddings at the boxing ring or try to find the boxing ring to have their, corporate event or whatever it was.
That's an interesting cultural part of this. Not only wine, but we were in Paris recently, and I tracked down the scenes from Midnight in Paris. Sat in the steps, went to the hotel, got kicked out. No, went to Rodin, and it's kind of interesting that you have that impact when you make a movie like that.
Well, people have a fond memory of it, and they imagine what it would be like to be there, and then they go there, and then they see the place. Sometimes it's bigger or smaller than they imagine, or it doesn't look the same way because we filmed it at exactly perfect time. Do
you think people, when they play this game, and we're going to talk about the game now, that's part of the connection, is maybe going back to the day that this thing happened, or end up at the winery because it's about Chateau Montelena? What's the anticipation of the fallout of the game?
That's the idea. That's what we've been talking about. And that's what Flint is so good at, is creating sort of the notion of you're in this place, and he's
Bottle Shock the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really funny how it came to be. And I mean, with me, I am not a wine expert by any means. I have friends who are, and they have a habit of inviting me. A friend of mine, Doug Lagerstrom, has invited my wife and I to tastings and blendings, and we make our own friend blend and all that. But I mean, I have zero expertise. Okay, but he did.
You won't tell anybody that. Oh, except for people
we
listening.
went to a well, that changes. That's the problem. Is when you start actually designing a game, you have to try to figure out how it works, at least mechanically, and then you start knowing, and sometimes maybe more than you want to know. But this all started out when Doug had purchased at some charity auction a sommelier to come over and present wines to us. And, I'd done that before. I'd been through 3 or 4 of okay, now take a look at the legs. Now the color and the clarity. Okay, to the nose. Going through the routine. And and this was just a particular, maybe I was in a bad mood or maybe it was a really tedious afternoon. But I'm thinking, I want to do this. I can do this. I can be the sommelier. And then it occurred to me, everybody wants to. Because, what's a game? A game is something where you get to be something you aren't really. I'm not really a world conqueror, but when I play Risk, I can be a world conqueror. I'm not a detective. You play Clue, you can be a detective. I'm not a slumlord, but I can play Monopoly. And do it. And so it's like everybody wants to play sommelier. And so I was trying to figure out, or be the person doing it. And then there's the question lurking. I think in a lot of ways, it's sort of the question of this era of human history. But you can apply it to wine too, and that is what's real and what's not. I mean, you listen to the poetic, philosophical, and almost theological, soliloquies in Bottle Shock or Virginia Madsen in Sideways. And or any of the Grapes of God or Blood of God or whatever that thing were. The people are talking about wine like it's poet stuff, and it always has been poet stuff. Okay, but it's wine. I mean, basically, it's a neurotoxin with different flavors in it. But nevertheless.
Wow, you really just broke it down to its root level, didn't you? Throwing some water
I don't
in
agree
there.
with that.
But that's what you have to do and so I was approaching it, and like you smell it and people, I'm smelling burnt rubber and and blueberry and a bit of tobacco, and I'm like not smelling any of that. I'm smelling, it smells like wine to me. Okay, and so I was thinking, how much of this is real? Because when you work in, I've done games that are virtual reality and alternate reality and augmented reality. But you get to real reality question. Okay, how much of this is stuff people are imagining? How much of it's really there? And I started out fairly cynical. And then the more you do it, the more I realize, no, there's something there. And you definitely can tell what's good and what's not. You know what I mean? And what you like and what you don't like, and how much of it's just what's marketed to me. But I think people really learn. I mean, a lot of people really learn by doing. Okay. And so this is in this game, you get, bottles and you put them inside a bag. So you hide the identity of the bottles. And there are a lot of variants on how you can play it, whether the people of the sommeliers know what they're pitching, what they don't. But everybody will host a tasting. And they'll give their review of it, and they'll position it, and all that, and they're encouraged to do all of the above. They can have romantic, philosophical statements about it. They can act like they're a marketing person. I would drink this on the beach on a windy day, in Gibraltar. Watching the ships go by. Or no, I'm in a dark French bar. Jim Morrison was just here, like right before he died, his last point, whatever, however you want to view it, because you actually can taste things. And the best advice somebody gave me is you sip the wine and you ask yourself what the first image that comes to your head is. And that's been very successful for me in identifying what the wine is. Now, is that real or is that obviously it's my imagination. But it's all
but that's real.
I want to stop it there for a second. That's really interesting stuff, because when people ask me to help them with wine, and there's no right answers, for one,
right,
and two, it's your point of view and all the years of history you've had with food, whatever you've done, whatever. Like I sat in a brasserie in Paris not too long ago, and they brought me a quiche, and I freaked out. I went back like 50 years because it was the smell my mom's quiche made.
Wow.
And I hadn't smelled it for 50 years. So they're so memorable. A smell and taste is so memorable, right? But you said something really interesting. I thought was really fun because everybody's intimidated by this, and I think the wine industry self-propagates the intimidation by doing this, swirling around and showing it. And I don't smell that, and you're like, oh shit, I must be an idiot because I don't smell that, right? When there's no right or wrong answer. And I always tell people, whatever you say it with confidence.
Right.
This smells like, Lucky Charms.
And that
sounds official.
And
that is our game.
Yeah. It's
Okay,
to
and
try and
our
make
game
it
is-
work for any level of connoisseur. Like
Right.
if you're just beginning, it works for that. If you want to do a more advanced version, we have that version too. So it's like,
And if you're a total bullshitter, you might win the game.
You might win the game on that, or you might get lucky and just simply have the best bottle, and so it's not.
Yeah, you might-
because
you might have
you'd
the
like
best
to make any game that anybody can play, there has to be luck to it. That's why cards.
This is really fun. I'm dying to do this because the regular traditional home tasting, you do the brown bagging, you get the score sheets. I used to give these things away at boxes of. Actually, it's a short story. A guy called me. He goes, I have 5,000 home wine kits for people to play, and not play, but do a home wine tasting. I got the bags, the pencils, the score sheets. He goes, I can't sell them to save my life. Nobody really wanted them. And so I got them for free, and I gave them away. People thought it was the World's Fair because I give them this stupid kit, but they never used it either.
Right.
Because there's too much intimidation in it, and there's too much like, I'm wrong about this. But if you're playing a game where everybody knows it's a game and you can take any direction you want, it's giving a whole new avenue to the idea of tasting wine.
Because that's the whole thing, because there's stakes. When there's a game, you have winners and losers, but it forces you to pay attention to stuff.
Yeah.
And that's it. It brings you to the immediacy, and in this game, like Randy been saying, you gotta have trivia stuff in here, and then I'm going, I'm a real game designer. I do not put.
we have trivia.
And I finally worked, and now I know why it's essential, because it is going to be educational. People will know about wine when they've done this. And obviously you can have wildly different difficulty levels, but this design, so you have different difficulty levels at the table. But as much as anything, it's experiential. And when you have to explain why you think this is the greatest wine in the world,
Camera's rolling.
Or conversely, that we have a version of it too, where you're trying to rig it, right? And so people are saying things that are disingenuous, and they're trying to get their bottle to win. You'll be keeping your real score for what you think the bottle is for later on, because there's an interesting capper to the game.
There's a whole flip at the end of the
Let's get to the practical side of that, because you said it a lot, and this is I'm not a game writer.
Right.
Okay? I've never had a person on the show that was a game writer.
Yeah,
But
we're pretty rare animals.
To put, I think so. To put levels of in a game, and to put different approaches, practical approaches to the game, and still make it fun. I mean, what does that mind do to do that? How do you take that in a practical sense and say, look, we're gonna make a game out of this. We got to cross dot all these I's and get rid of these cross T's, because people are going to be bored with those.
Well, I mean, only just because I have kids that are like 23 and 21, and we played a number of these games today, or do this a lot. There's like Wingspan, and there's Botany, and these various games that have come out that are like these kind of games, where you can play it on one level in the game the way the rules are. You can play a very simple version of it that plays like in an hour, let's say, or these are how games work. Or you can do the more complicated version of the game, where suddenly a card means 2 or 3 different things, and you have various ways you can go in your game. So there's complications there. In this game, we've also added the fact that like, let's say you want to go the sommelier extreme version, which is what we have something called the sommelier extreme version. They're really difficult questions that you have to have an experience like you have of having lived in wine to be able to answer the questions. And that's so that you can have your snobby friends come and play the game and be intrigued. But you don't have to play that level. You can play the simpler level. That's kind of how it works. Now, as far as how he designs it, I can't speak to how he designs it, but he's a professor of games, so he knows all about this stuff.
Well, it takes a mind to break it down to granular forms and reassemble them into an entertaining environment.
And a lot of testing.
And a lot
Which
of
is-
testing.
Which is fun with this game.
It is
Yeah,
all
that's
about,
right.
it's all about testing and iteration. And even the end user, remember when we release a game, it's just our approximation. We think it's going to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of ways you can tune it and vary it for what you think is fun and play that up and play down the stuff you don't think is fun. And play as you get to be more experienced and better at it.
What did you do to research for this? Like we're talking about Drops of God and some other stuff. Did you watch movies? Did you-
Yeah, I've watched pretty much every wine movie I could come across, and the documentaries and all this. But I mean, part of it, I mean, what I'm really interested in right now is making social games. Games where people bring in their friends and interact with each other. I just thought since COVID, everybody lost their social skills. And secondly, people want to do stuff where they're all in the room playing. Doing. Engaging each other. And so we're trying to do this with no apps. I mean, the default in every case, well, you have your app, which we don't want to do that. No phones, lose the screens. This is 2 or 3 hours with your friends, door to door. You're probably not trash because the amount of wine you're consuming is actually not much unless you're, doing alternate.
Well,
we do have.
I don't want to play
We do
that.
have. We do have where you can get the pour. It can be a double
yes.
pour. We have
Yes,
that.
It
It's
comes
up to you.
complete with the 1 ounce pour. Okay, so in theory,
But you can have the double pour if you want.
If you play the game
okay.
by its rules, any version of it, you will not get a DUI on the way home. But I mean, as far as researching it, what it really is you just sort of watch all this stuff. You start out with an initial intention. And kind of a fun goal. And my fun goal was to let everybody, pretend to be the person, the somm reviewing and promoting or demoting the wine. And they get to be something they're not. They pretend to be an expert. Because when you pretend to be an expert, you actually do learn stuff. Okay. Even if you're just BSing your way through it, it's impossible
right.
to make
That's
a
true.
good game that
That's
people
true.
don't learn from. I mean, I was making fun of Clue, but who didn't learn deductive reasoning from Clue?
Yeah, right.
Who didn't learn, thinking in advance from tic-tac-toe? I mean, you probably had to play 20 times before you realized how to get a cats game every time.
Right.
Everybody learned capitalism from Monopoly, even though the game was made to be anti-capitalist. But anyway, but everybody did, you learn
But not
strategy
slot machine.
from risk.
That one.
Yeah, a slot machine. Well, you learn what cherries look like, and you get a rapid and brutal education into probability playing slot machines. But so basically you're learning while you're doing, and you're hanging out with your friends drinking wine. And how bad can that be? But you're also evaluating each of the wines and giving your sense of it and why you like it and why you don't like it, for what reason, and rating it against others. And you're developing skills. You learn what notes are. And then, there's a moment you go, yeah, okay, I see that blackberry. I thought that was phony when I first heard it.
Well, I can tell you a funny story. Up in Napa, I was with some friends. Now they're with me in Bordeaux, and they're like, wow, they had lots of things to say about the wines in Bordeaux. But at that time in Napa, I said something like this. I got little hints of dark chocolate. And it's like, what you say is bullshit. My friend, one of my best friends. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, I don't believe any of that. I said, well, let me just ask you this question. You're tasting these two wines. They're both 2014 Cabernets. They're from two different properties, same winery, same winemaker. Do they taste different to you? He said, yeah. I go, you just got started.
Yep.
Because you can't define the difference, but you recognize the difference. Did you find, like I do, and I'm going to show you a sizzle reel before you guys go that I created, that almost all wine stuff is boring as hell, and that it's snobbery in its worst. I mean, it can be snobbery.
Well, that
in its
is
worst form.
exactly the impulse we were attacking. I was attacking when I started designing the game. I was absolutely convinced that I could go in with one bill fill or swill or one bill swill or $2 chuck, and you could have, Chateau, expensive on the other side of it. And
I like the French accent, expensive.
People could, that's French for expensive. I just make up French words.
Okay, plus cher.
Exactly. Exorbitant. Anyway, so so I just went in there and thought, it'd be really funny to try to con people. We know we're going to have 4 different levels and price points of wine, 4 different ratings on any objective thing. and see if people can really tell the difference.
Yeah.
And I went in totally cynical, thinking that a charismatic person could sell one Bill Swill, to people as something great, or vice versa. You could be really, really brown mouthing something really good, and people think, "Oh, it really does taste bad." I don't necessarily believe that anymore. I flip back and forth about every 2 weeks into what I really think, but that's why it's intriguing, because I mean, it's like any really great puzzle. It's like there is objective truth in there. There is subjective opinion. There is romantic opinion, and it's what you were talking about. Smell is the most powerful, cognitive influencer. In other words, it brings back memories the best, right? It's like any kind of cologne, or like it's spring because of what it smells like, right? You don't smell pittosporum in L.A. in the middle of the summer very often. I mean, so it's very important to us, and it's all hidden in there. This stuff's real. And there are objective values, there are subjective values, and that is the stuff of social gaming. And then, and what is real and what's not, and that's the issue of right now. I mean, we're being told videos we saw on TV were fakes, okay?
Right.
And
all kinds of fronts now.
If you get something that's as subjective as what we're talking about, and yet there is an objective component to it. Whether we agree they taste different, we all agree that what tastes good and bad is a matter of opinion, sort of. Then you get the snobs. And I was really kind of curious, am I ever going to meet somebody who really can, taste, oh, yes, the terrier of this.
Well, our plan is once we get through this Kickstarter, which is on right now.
Kickstarter, okay.
Yeah, is we're going to get Bo Barrett, maybe Heidi Barrett, and a few other vintners, and have them play the game.
Oh, that'd be...
And then
the high level version.
The high level,
that'd be really
version
fun.
of the game.
Yep.
And
then
film it.
Film them. And just
And
have
see
them
what
have
people
them
really
bullshit
know.
each other, basically.
Yeah, you get real experts. I
It's
want
going to
do
be
the
great
same
to
thing.
see.
I want to get game designers doing it, figuring out how they outgame each other to be right or wrong.
I find the more I play the game, the better it. At first, I thought I can't identify anything, but the more times I play the game, the better I am at identifying the differences between the wines.
Well,
but there is another element of this game that's just pure fun.
Yes.
Which is that, there's a bullshit. You're assigned a role, and you're assigned a different role.
Yeah,
and
you're a
he's assigned
judge, you're a
different
rig judge, you're a vintner, you're a
think
landowner.
You're trying to get people to vote for the wine you want to win, stuff like that.
I think that is going to be the game changer for people to play. In other words, if, like I said earlier, if you bring up the word wine, you've already taken 75% of the people out of the game. Like, I'm changing the name of this podcast because I'm going to do a lot of immigration stories, some incredible stories to tell that come from this thing. But if I put wine talks out there, 75% of the people are going to go, I don't really, I don't want to talk about wine when it's not going to be about wine.
Right.
So I want to focus my marketing of the show to all bigger audiences. And so the idea that you're going to just have fun, and that in some cases sounds like you're mocking the idea, which is perfectly fine.
You can approach it that way, or you can go at it exactly the opposite way. And then, I
think that's valid, because people like my buddy saying it's bullshit what you're talking about. And all of a sudden, and you said something important, which is the experiential part of like this meal I had in Paris. Somebody's going to play this game, and then one day at a restaurant, taste a wine and go, gee, and they're going to go back to the day they played this game, maybe the second time or the third time.
Yeah, and use some of the phrases, or use
itself.
some of the thoughts, or use some of the notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Because the other thing, too, that I think is really important in why this game works right now is the very nature of it is incredibly experiential and mindful. I mean, you have to be right here, right now, and notice where you are and what you're doing and what just went into your mouth. And people don't do that very much. 90% of the wine I drink at some party goes into a glass, and unless there's something striking about it, don't notice it. When you stop and notice it, the entire world starts unlocking all the way around you. Mm-hmm. It is a mindfulness, presence of mind for a, perpetually distracted civilization right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I mean, we've all turned off our phones, but imagine the aggregate number of messages and calls we've received and notifications we've received since we started this conversation. And so part of this is about just stepping back. You want to, if you do it ideally, you redo your living room or your backyard, and almost anybody's backyard, any environment can look like some kind of winery. You know, one of the most fun places I do has nothing but vinyl albums, but it's basically inside a storage facility.
Yeah.
But I mean, that works too. And so you all of a sudden think your environment is, what would it be in the wine environment? And then the wrinkle we've added on to it, and it happened at our first play test where, you know, we've done it in our backyard, and our backyard can kind of look like you're somewhere in, you know, France or somewhere. Probably in like Morris, Spain. But anyway, it's in fact in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's Pacoima, France.
Yeah,
Have you heard of
I
that?
actually thought it was Lisbon.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, what it is
Van
you're
Nuys,
sitting there,
France. It's
if
very
you go
nice area.
outside, you have windows, which are some only found in L.A. They're Gothic windows with a Moorish frame around them. Okay, because we live in a country that was, you know, founded by a bunch of Moors and Visigoths, right? You know, I mean, a state in Los Angeles. That's why you got all this Spanish architecture here. And that's what.
So
I didn't know that.
Here's,
That's good.
But
so
anyway,
go ahead. This is my father's. So this is probably circa 1972. This actual brochure.
Sea swirl, sniff, and
And the sea
savor.
swirls. My dad would go lecture, and it tells you all the things here, which is probably in this game, right? How the sea swirls.
those are the things everybody does all the way through. I mean, I had to define early on. I'm doing a wine tasting game, not a wine appreciation game, and they aren't mutually exclusive. But the skill you are going to learn is how to evaluate it. That's the first thing you're going to.
I've evaluated, using the word evaluated, probably 4 potential games that to come to market, and they were all like really boring to play, and they all basically played off of this, right? Which is boring. This patch here, Les Amis d'Event, was a group in the 70s all over the country. I have an anecdotal story about the founder, but you know, they would get together, and this was a big event. You know, the women would wear their mink stoles. They'd come to Palos Verdes. They'd go to Marineland, and they'd have dinner in the fancy room. And Robert Mondavi would speak. And so that aristocracy of what's going on. And here, you're creating an environment that everybody can approach and possibly pick up on what this is, because for me, the stigma of what we do is our own problem. We've created it. And there are some people in this industry that would love for it to continue that way because it gives them an edge on something else. Like, for instance, and I love this comment from one of the great L.A. wine guys named Ed Massiana. You know, I certainly can appreciate the fact that a master of wine or a master somm can identify a region, you know, of a wine or vintage or the grape. That's great. It's fun. It's part of the academia. But so what? I mean, really, so what that you have the talent to do that? What about the talent of like choosing wines people might like, understanding who you're selling it to, being able to explain it to somebody who doesn't understand the words themselves? Right. I think that's the part of wine that needs to change, if it ever will change.
Yeah, also let people participate in it. You know, the world's changed a lot. There were a lot of things that you could only be an observer of, and now almost anything you can participate in it. You know, like most sports, you know, I mean, for our kids, what's kind of bad is everything is so professionalized by the time you're 9 that, you know, I mean, you know,
the club sports.
But the club sports and all that stuff that, you know, everybody knows who, you know, the next, you know, Tom Brady's going to be. But there are now all sorts of things you can go do. Okay. And just deem yourself an expert, and you just deem yourself a wine expert, and subjectively we all are.
We call these influencers.
We call them influencers.
But even in the movie, he says, Alan Rickman at the end of the movie says the democratization of wine.
Yeah.
That's what, and we did that. What was that? 2007, 2008.
I mean, we were saying even in China they'll be making wine, and of course that just predicted what, you know, came along and happened.
Yeah.
Georgia,
China,
also too,
Chile. Argentina.
But you know what? We are focusing a lot on the wine tasting. There is a very important part of this game, the overwhelming part of this game, where it's just pure fun.
Yes.
You know, where you're coming and you're assigned a character.
You pick from
and your
various
character. You're bluffing. You may not be bluffing. You may be the legitimate character, but a lot of the characters are posing and bluffing and trying to trick everyone else. So there is a part of the game that's just
we're kind of
fun.
making fun of what you're talking about.
With the first version of the mystery game, we really are setting it in 1977. You know, because the Judgment of Paris was 1976, right? And the Judgment of St. Helena is 1977, and kind
down
of
the road.
Yeah,
from...
people want to rig the results, right?
And our Judgment of St. Helena is fabricated, obviously.
Of course.
It's the game Judgment.
Well, because Judgment of Paris, here's a trivia question for you. Does anybody know what Judgment of Paris is a pun on? I mean, it's a reference to in mythology.
It's was it like Napoleon or something?
No, it was ancient Greek mythology. The gods or goddesses were having an argument about which of them was most beautiful. It was like Venus and Artemis and Hera, maybe.
Yes.
I can't remember what the three were. But anyway,
So that's a little snobby.
and they get Paris in there. They get Paris, not Paris the city. Paris was the guy who, later, and the prize was you get the most beautiful woman in the world. Okay, Paris picks Venus, and he gets Helen of Troy. And from that comes the Trojan War and all that. I mean, the Judgment of Paris was the biggest event in probably mythology and you could argue literature ever. And nobody knows what it was.
And yeah, I never heard
We
that
have
story.
the Judgment of St. Helena, and you're going to have to do some research to know what it is. But it is mythologically just as solid and maybe a little more sinister.
It's kind of like there's a little bit to tell the truth in this.
Yes, there is.
Yes.
There's a little bit of that.
Yes, there is. And you get to play characters. If you want to play, and obviously the host decides how much they want to take this literally. Like I went to a 60s party for a guy who was playing, who had turned 60s, but he was a guy who was like, his heyday in life was 60s, this was a while back, was in the 60s. And I showed up and all these people were dressed like it was the 60s at the party, and so was I. And it was eerie. I mean, it actually really worked. I mean, oddly enough, that what they were dressed in looked more 70s to me, but they were actually there in the 60s. And
So tell me what this looks like. Are you standing around? Do we have bottles on the table? Are we swirling, sniffing?
there's
Is it sort of an interactive cocktail party at the time going on while you're doing this?
It's a game that has, there's rules to the game, obviously.
Right.
So the host decides whether it's a white wine or red wine night.
Okay.
And then 4 bottles are brought. You can play with more people, but let's just do the basics. So 4 bottles are brought. They're put in blind bottle bags. They're opened. Nobody knows which bottle's which. You pick characters. There's like 16 characters to pick from. They're, like he described, they're all different levels of characters. Or
I love the graphics, by the way.
different
those
people.
characters.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Really cool.
So there's all these different characters, and there's
have
different
agendas.
agendas. Everybody has a different agenda. That they're like want to get theirs to win. They're losing their chateau. They need to win because they need the wine to win, or they're the vintner that has a problem with phylloxera.
This is all explained as a character.
It's all
you
in the
pick.
character, yeah.
Are you picking the character by you want
Randomly.
to, or it's random?
You're
Or
randomly
the
picking.
host can
No, it's
assign
a
them to
card.
you.
Yeah,
They can
pick a
send
card.
them to you ahead of time.
How you get the cards up to you?
Well, you either okay.
Put them in a hat, or you just say pick one.
A host ahead of time, the host can send you a card and say, "This is your character." You can send it to you physically,
Kind of like
or
script
digitally.
analysis at this point, right? I mean,
Well,
And if you'll see a picture of the person, they're all pretty easy to understand. And
Kinda depends,
If
like,
people
if
want to
you-
show up in costume, they can. If they
yeah,
don't.
right.
In
That's
their
what,
mix,
that's what I'm
right?
thinking.
and then there's a setup card which is random as to whether you're a rig judge or whether you're an honest judge or whether you have this or whether you have that. And then as you go through the various stages, there's 4 rounds of tasting, basic rounds of tasting. During the rounds, there's different things that happen in the game where you pick cards and you answer questions and whatnot. But you also have to taste the wine and give your analysis of the wine as you're tasting it for the other people. And you're giving clues, which are things from your cards, to other people to tip them off of whether you're a rig judge or an honest judge, and they're trying to figure it out because you're saying, I feel that this has a bit of blackberry in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, you're obviously brown mouthy. Yes, and the blackberry would be, if somebody asked me about blackberry, I know this is the other rig judge. Basically, it's a riff on the game Mafia that every Gen Z.
And then, so how does it
person
end? How
in
do
the world-
you?
So then what happens is there's scoring, the various rounds. There's some scoring that's going
And
on.
what does the score represent? The scoring of the wine, the scoring of the person that you.
It could be
All of the above.
whether you get answers right on these some of the trivia questions. It could be whether you pick the particular wine, and then at the end of the 4 rounds, through the 4 rounds, also you're voting people off the island. Basically, there's a bit of like, well, I really think he's a rig judge because of this and that. Now he may be an honest judge, but you want to get rid of him because he's against you in the game. And so you're lying and saying, well, he's obviously, you saw what he said about the blackberry and he knows something that he's not supposed to know. You're playing games with each other.
Which is stealth education, right?
Right.
Because you find out what's true and what's not true, right? But then this all came from my daughter and a friend of hers. These are a couple Gen Z kids, both having the idea because they didn't know they wanted to talk about wine for 4 hours, right? You got to put a mystery in here. You ever played Mafia? And I said, yeah, I played Mafia in 5,000 different variations of it. But it's a game where every kid under a certain age knows how to play it, and you learn it inside 2 seconds. Where you're trying to there are 3 people on that are Mafia, and then everybody else is a villager, and the Mafia guys win if they kill all the villagers, and the villagers win if they nail the 3 Mafia guys. But you're going from clues from the people and all that, and we just put content on top of that. But it's basic play pattern. So you're doing that in between the wine tastings, which just kind of makes it fun because the whole thing in any kind of social game is get people talking to each other.
Yeah, right.
That otherwise wouldn't be talking to each other.
So you have that element, and then
wine loosens the lips a little bit.
Exactly. And then round
Social
5,
lubricant.
which is after the 4 rounds, round 5, all the bottles of wine are switched into other bags, and you're trying to say, well, I think wine 1 was wine number 2 last time. Wine 3 is wine number 4.
Wow.
In other words, you
And
taste
makes it
them all
really
a second
difficult.
time.
Yeah.
Randy and I
trying
have
to
yet to
match
get
them.
one right.
That's an
Jody
experience.
nailed it.
And you get more
experienced
points for
person
that. You
can
get
find
points
that.
for getting those
Yeah.
right.
Most really experienced wine people, if they've tasted enough, there's only 4 bottles, should be able to figure that out.
Let's
Let's say that, yes.
But it's not always.
But you
Randy
don't
and
know
I,
that's
however,
so true.
Jody nailed it. Randy and
I got
were
2
looking.
right in the last time we played the game. It took me many
No,
rounds.
I know it's very difficult to do anyway. Okay.
Right.
Let's
Well,
talk
there's
about
all
also
cabs.
the wine decants in the meantime too.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course it'll
So it
change.
changes.
Yeah.
Let's talk the business of wine the business of games. Very popular show on history is the games that changed America or the games that changed the world, the food and all that. And they've all these amazing games that we grew up with have peculiar histories. But now we have things like Kickstarter, so
Yeah.
you can put that up there. What do you get for Kickstarter for contributing?
Well, the
levels?
way it works on the reason people do Kickstarter in general is you need to show the Bev, let's say it's Bevmo or Total Wine or the Wine Club. You have to show the world that this is something that's viable that people like, right? So that's part of the reason why
Right. That's a good
games
point,
are actually really successful on Kickstarter. I didn't know this a year ago. I realized this when we start to work with Flint, is that it's been very successful on Kickstarter, the whole game concept. And so what happens on this is we're selling the game at a reduced price because we want people to buy the game, and then we can show the world, hey, this is really viable, and this is how this
So
is
you're
why it works.
seeking. Somebody
It's
put
like
up money
proof
to
of
produce.
concept.
Yeah, well, we have a game. We have the game. We have a
produced
prototype
it?
of the game.
Yeah, we have the prototypes.
And what we'll do is we're deciding whether we print 500 games or we're making 1,000 copies.
Yeah,
wine
and,
tasting
and,
kits.
and then ultimately, is this something that's sold at retail? And if so, where? Is it sold at wine shops? Is it sold at wineries?
Okay.
Do we do custom scenarios of the game for the winery where you're doing an Agatha Christie at, a winery that, wants to sponsor,
Yeah.
that kind of thing?
Because I've had many people sit in that chair that come into the wine world and they think they have a better idea, but the wine world is like 12,000 years old and there's not too many new ideas. But their ideas today are mostly contemporarily packaging them, right? Like Tetra Paks or small bottles or things that aren't revolutionary. It's always about what's in the glass. And the reason I said that was they clearly don't care. So they're building a brand around a packaging so that they can build it up and sell it and take, sell off some market share, get some market share, sell it back. Does that happen in the game business where you
that's not really what
send it off to Milton Bradley, even if they even exist anymore?
Yeah, they're part of Hasbro now, but they still exist. Well, I mean, like everything else, the game business is kind of the tabletop game business has been booming lately, since COVID and all that, and people actually want to be around each other.
It's like the vinyl record business just came back.
Yeah.
But all
like
the
that.
businesses, all the entertainment businesses are having their own kind of crisis right now and their own nature. And you know, and I mean, with Bottle Shock, what's great about it is, first of all, the title sounds like a game.
Yeah, right.
You know, and I mean, you know, there's the System Shock and BioShock and, you know, Bottle Shock.
Good.
Okay,
you know games. I don't know
right.
that many.
I mean, people will expect it to be, you know, you're throwing bottles at people. We're going to dissuade them from that. But you know, so I mean, games are like, they're just great to superimpose on stuff. I mean, you know, everything's about gamification right now, and you know, and with this, it just gets you to notice it and play it, and gives you a reason to care, even this extrinsic reason, until you know enough to intrinsically care. It's a great. This is just a great way to have a party.
It's got so many angles, so many fresh angles, and I think it's going to be a refreshing. A shot in the arm for the industry. The industry of wine is in a bad place, and there's a lot of reasons for it. I'll bore you with them now, but online sales are off. I didn't sell my company because I was making too much money.
Yeah,
and you know, so I think this is an opportunity, really potentially a huge opportunity, to get wine into the hands of people that really have been intimidated by it. They get to play a game and they realize it's not so intimidating.
Yeah.
Well, it would be, but the dream would be obviously to be this game sitting there at Bevmo or Trader Joe's or wherever, you know, and people pick up 8 bottles of wine to play this game.
Right.
So like the vintners and all the wine people, you know, they're like, hey, let's be the Bottle Shock this week of our flight of wine.
We can't sell alcohol, obviously. We're in the game business, but I mean, I would love to see, you know, because if people would, you know, brand different bottles of wine they have, you know, certain ways, or label them certain ways, we could actually use them as game objects, and then their whole other, you know, parts of it. I mean, it started with those, remember 13 Crimes, when you did the AR thing where you're looking at the guy? I mean, I have no idea whether the wine's great or kidney squeeze, but what I do know is it got me to stop.
I liked it.
In my aisle at the, sorry, Zach, that's a technical
I'm giving you
term,
an evil eye because you said I liked it.
Yeah, right. That's a technical term, right?
Kidney squeeze. But, I'm not sure about that.
But it got me to stop in the aisle, you know, Ralph's, and, you know, hold up my thing. Oh, wow, the guy's talking to me. Well, I mean, imagine you start, because wine needs to get its mystique back. You know, the problem is anything that turns into a commodity has no mystique. I mean, that's why people want vinyl records now. You know, you want to own the physical object and sit around there and read the lyrics like you're looking at the Rosetta Stone back like we used to, and we'd buy a record. You know,
but the game is also, I have to say, really validating.
Yeah,
because it validates your own taste.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
because we have played the game several times where we were shocked by our community assessment of the wines, which had nothing to do with the price point.
And now you realize you want Bartles and James wine coolers. No,
no, but I mean, yes, you're tasting things at all different levels, you know, and you're saying, okay,
I get it.
What's the difference here? And,
well, that's what you hope happens.
Yeah,
we hope happens, and this is something very important, because my philosophy, and I've done this for 35 years. I sold 17 million bottles of wine in my career. Wow. And I've tasted 100,000. So I learned something.
Yes,
not a lot, but I learned something.
Well, at 10,000 hours, you already learned.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what's happening, and this is very important for the game, that we are going back to my dad's era of the experiential side of wine.
Yes.
Saying I bought a bottle of wine on the internet for $3 through Groupon is not an experience, and it's not a story. It's not a story you want to tell at dinner time.
Is there a less romantic story you can tell about it? Exactly. I mean, yeah, because that's what's the other thing great about Bottle Shock is, what's the wine really about? It's like that afternoon, you're sitting out there with the beautiful blonde, and she's trying the wine, and you know what?
Yeah,
well, it's a beautiful brunette day, but that was a different day. That was like, it was cloudy, and we were kind of inside. Different day, but you know I mean, but it's attaching the whole romance to it.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah.
You know,
it's the most important part of it.
Yeah, and they don't want to. And that's very hard to sell at $3 on the internet.
It doesn't exist. There's no story behind it, and people get. Well, I'll tell you a funny story. I tasted it. I was on written up by Punch Drink, the online beverage site. She came and actually watched me taste one day. And I said, let's taste this. Somebody sent me a sample in between the regular crowd that comes in. And it was Saturday Night Live Beaujolais.
It's called Saturday Night Live Beaujolais?
Yeah, it was bottled for something for Saturday Night Live. And it was a current vintage. It wasn't like, because Beaujolais doesn't last long in the bottle. But it was Beaujolais from France. And we opened it, and it was horrible. And I thought to myself, the poor person that bought this wine at the store, wherever they want, oh, we're going to celebrate Saturday Night Live, we're going to watch the show, we'll pour a glass of wine, cannot tell the story. Like, this is great, because it's not. And so the whole thing blew up in their face that they bought this wine in the first place. And and I think part of that, going to the wine side of this, what I heard in Bordeaux this last trip was just these people need to stay the course. You can't deviate from your plan, your idea for what you want to produce in the vineyard, get in the bottle. The industry will come around to it when you do things where you experience it enough and people go, wow, this is really something interesting. Putting a kidney sweet on the shelf in front of it and putting Snoop Dogg's picture on it, is not the experience that people are looking for with wine. And so you're giving a chance with this game for people to experience wine.
Make it
and
fun
really
and make it
notice
experience.
and then communicate it.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing that's happened. When you turn the wine into poetry, I mean, we have people doing slogans, we have people doing,
some of the people we had were amazing. They just,
I love that.
Came out with stuff. It was crazy.
Also,
they were saying stuff.
That's what this age is about. I mean, ever since AI came in, remember everybody was supposed to get a degree in, STEM, for the last 20 years. Okay, AI, whoever writes the best prompt wins. Who are you going to recruit for jobs next year?
Yeah, right.
Find every poet you can available. That is who's going to write AI. Okay, and we're in an age now where we have to connect with our emotions and our feelings, which is actually all we care about, and communicate it to other people and have fun doing it. Because if you're not having fun doing it,
I see that
it's not worth doing, right?
I see that.
And all of a sudden you're putting the fun back into it, but all the components of fun. We could do a module of it that's a stand-up comedian module that has jokes on the back of the bottle where you could do the wine roast if you wanted to, but and that that may be fifth expansion pack, but it involves drinking a lot more wine. We'll get the really big pour measure.
Yeah, that's a different kind of wine.
That's that's an 8-ounce pour. I mean, you can go endless directions with this, but it's all about people relating to, and wine, you're shooting fish in a barrel because it's innately social. You share a bottle of wine with people.
And honestly, we've done tests where somebody who didn't know anything about wine, they were just really good at playing the game.
Yeah, right. Just because the game part of it was great.
They were great at the game part.
Game part, hidden identity, all that stuff. People like that.
That's a key component.
You have to have that.
Yeah.
You have to
somebody.
Because all of a sudden it's something for, we have people, friends that have allergies to wine. I have friends that, are in AA. They can be there too, doing the mystery part of the game or the other social part of the game.
Wow.
And so you're not booting anybody out of the experience.
That's really
Which is good because you bring people into the wine world that don't have a,
Well, it's going to be, I think I just read that it's going to be the final exam for the Master Sommelier test that you play the game and win it. And that's how you.
I know. Well, we do have the Master Sommelier edition coming out. That's the ultimate stretch goal for all three of them that exist in the world. You got to sell it.
We've conquered that
you got to find
core
out
audience
people that think they are. That's the target market for that. But
we're already on an hour.
Oh,
if you can believe that. I would like to do this again.
Yeah,
and peel it back a little further as the campaign gets going. As I play the game at my home.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah,
because I'm just thinking about all the variations. What have I know so far? The four wines. You could structure the game around, like just very special things. Like let's say Armenian wine. I'm Armenian.
Yeah,
there's a whole new culture of Armenian wine, and so you could play it under different cultures. You could play it under different regions.
Right. Yes. The Tipsy Gypsy one that worked perfectly.
Yeah.
You can.
But the host can say, "We want
crooks in the wine business."
Yeah, crooks in the wine business. Yeah,
and the host could say, "I want to have all Armenian wines tonight."
Right.
Yeah,
or I want to have this, and then the people who go that are part of the game, they go find that wine. They go out to the store and they find that wine.
That's another part. The experience of going and shopping, talking.
They told me to find a Cabernet that's like this.
And you get to talk about it. Yeah, and you build up the lore for all these wines. because you
That's
got to
right.
encourage them to
That's
do
true.
that because they have to build the mystery and the lore. I mean, where I learned a lot about, where I learned most things in life, but especially this was in the frat house. Okay, our idea of what to serve at frat parties
Pour it all
was
together.
a trash can zombie.
We
and
poured it all
Sugar
together.
Punch
That's what
and
we
all
did.
that stuff,
We
right?
did that.
And then one of our social chairman said, we're going to have a wine and cheese party. He was relentlessly, matter of fact, he was known as wine and cheese for the rest of the time he was in college. However, all of a sudden, sorority girls showed up, actually wanted to be there. Nobody was having a vomiting for distance contest in the backyard.
Yeah, that
it
was
was
good for
actually
you.
a very civilized night. Yeah. So
Where was this?
it was at Berkeley.
Oh, Berserkly.
Yeah.
Wonder.
Imagine a Berserkly frat in the 70s.
Yeah,
That's
right.
where it was.
No.
Yeah. And the house had previously been thrown off campus because they put something other than wine in their punch, and
We have a whole separate
town
conversation.
chirping.
about
Yeah,
that.
there's
that's
a lot of
separate
that.
conversation. USC was a very different experience.
Yeah, well, I won't get into it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be fun, and I'll close with this, but it'd be fun. Rudy Kirwan, the guy that's got thrown in jail.
Yeah.
He's back at it, apparently. And so I got a text from a friend who was out in Singapore at the time. This is recently shopping money for a real estate deal, and he had dinner with Rudy. And he had this
He's
idea.
back to doing wine again?
Yeah.
He's not in jail anymore.
No, he's back in Thailand or wherever he's from. And so the guy's idea was, what if we created a brand around Rudy's formulas and called them Rudy's Lafitte and Rudy's Margaux and Rudy's Beaujolais, and people would buy this because it's just
a
crazy
fraudulent
story.
thing.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So there could be
We
the
should put
Rudy
a Rudy
Kirwan
character in the
version.
game.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Rudy,
Because the game gives you all the kinds of different hustlers and
So
all that
funny.
stuff. That's the fun of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, con artists. We even have wine detection agencies that may or may not exist in the real world. And
they do, yeah.
That know that there are people that are,
That's
bullshitting.
actually a very popular thing. Though.
Yeah.
Well, great to have you folks in. I don't want to take any more of your time, but I suspect we'll get together again.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
We
it's
look
fun.
forward to it.
And
It's
have
fun.
some fun with this.
Yeah, and I would love to see comments from the listeners too.
Yes, of
if
course.
they have good ideas, we'll appropriate them. And
Yeah, of course.
we'll give them no credit. But yeah, that'd be good.
I'll publish it shortly, and then we'll gather that up. And
And it's available right now on
See that.
Kickstarter. Everybody should just go get it. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
right now.
you
and
get
what's
a lot
the
of good
title?
stuff in
Bottle
it.
Shock. I
Bottle
suppose?
Shock, the wine game.
Okay.
It's
We're
pretty
really
easy to
creative
find.
about the title. Yeah, and the mystery is the Judgment of Saint Helena.
Yes. Cheers.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you
Cheers.
for having us.